Dear friends, a conclusion could be rather short. We have a lot of work to be done, and we will work in order to give women in the European Union equal pay and equal treatment. It is very useful that experts and members of the parliament from different countries have gathered here to discuss this issue. We notice that we have the same problem, but we also notice that in certain issues the situation is better in one country than in another, and we will perhaps learn some ways with which to promote these questions. Finland is considered to be an example of equality, but you have heard that this is not always the case. For example, I learned that in our neighbor country, Estonia, the editor-in-chief of two big newspapers are women. In Finland, this is not the case. A woman has not been chosen for the most important posts in our economic sector. Our forestry and agricultural organizations do not have many women leaders. I would like to take up a few issues here. To begin with, many people have emphasized the fact that progress is very slow and improvements are very slow. I'm old enough that I can say that I've started my studies in the 70s. And I remember when I started studying, especially my mother considered that when I started to study law, I would be able to get the same pay as men, and it is very important for me to get my own salary. Well, the salary of a member of parliament is also the same between men and women, but if I were a lawyer in Finland, the salary there is a lot worse than for men. Why? Because of the simple reason that the work performed by women is not valued. And I will give you a personal example of this. In Brussels a few years ago, the restaurant organizations of Europe invited us to an event. We went to a very good restaurant where we met representatives of the employers of the restaurant sector. And I noted that most of the waiters were men. And I even said this to the person sitting next to me. And he said that in Belgium we have a lot of waiters who are men. And he said, but this work is very valued here. That is the reason. So I did not ask anything else after that. I thought that explained everything. It explained absolutely everything. If a job is very well valued, the salary is good, and you will see men in that profession. And when the job is less valued, it's often dominated by women. But I think that, for example, the patients in the nursing care sector will value the nurses. We all know how helpless we are when we are sick, and how important it is that we're taken care of. We have a lot of work to be done. Very interesting points came up. Rule of law, for example. Why doesn't this work in our salary system? For example, the EU controls. You know that there are small mistakes in agriculture. The aid for a whole year can be lost, but if you pay less to a woman for the same job, It will be taken into court and you will be fined. But EU does not control this. The EU considers it to be more important to control the cows in the Union than it is to control the fact that women are paid an equal pay. This tells us a lot about the values within the EU. What is important? What is valuable? The earmarkings on a cow are more important to be monitored than equal pay. And another observation. I'm sorry if I'm being a bit negative, but this has to do with the EU. We have noticed, and it is very important, that the EU now has initiated an advertising campaign. We could see this at the airport even, a campaign having to do with equality. But we women should ask ourselves if we think that a campaign such as this is sufficient when we have the EU 2020 strategy with all of its measures which should be performed. There are no advertisement campaigns in the EU 2020 strategy. Something which was also spoken about here, which I think is very timely and important, is that the maternity leave for 20 weeks and full pay for this maternity leave. This is not a question of money, it's a question of values and of choices. The population in the EU is growing older. We try to find new employees and wish to increase the birth rate. I understand very well that a young woman who loses all of her salary or a part of it if she gets pregnant will certainly consider how many children she wants to have. A solution to the problem that we do not have so many children in Europe is that we should value families and mothers. But we will continue working. We have been elected so that we would work. And all of you who have spoken here today have come in order to share information with us. I hope you have all received some information and some enthusiasm to work in order to remove this problem. I wish to thank all of you for coming here, for traveling a long way to come here. I hope that this discussion has been important for you as well, and once you go home, I hope that you will have the strength to continue with this very important work so that rule of law would also be implemented for women.